Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of the NASEO Energy Security Committee All Hazards Call. This is our State Energy Security Plan debrief and look forward. We're really excited for all of you to join us today. I'm Campbell Delahoyd. For those of you that don't know, I'm with NASEO. I'm our Energy Security and Resilience Program Director, and I'll be facilitating and emceeing our session here today. A couple quick housekeeping items before we get into it. So this call is for state and territory energy offices only, and select federal partners. So if you are a private sector person or NASEO affiliate, we do ask you to kindly drop off at this time. Additionally, this meeting is being recorded. We will be sending this out to the NASEO Energy Security Committee, as well as anyone from the NASEO state or territory membership that requests it specifically. Lastly, there will be a couple opportunities for questions or for Q&A, so please feel free to drop those into the chat throughout today. Otherwise, we'll announce when the verbal Q&A can take place. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pull up some slides. In just a second. Bear with me. How are we looking?
Campbell, you're muted. Sorry.
I don't know what happened there. Sorry, folks. We're going to walk through a couple remarks from our respective leaderships from NASEO, SCEP, and CESER. We'll do a quick SCSP review and debrief from our friends at CESER and PNNL. And then we'll turn to some state presentations, followed by a general wrap-up and Q&A session. So without any further ado, I would now like to introduce David Terry, the president of NASEO, for a few opening remarks. David.
Thank you, Campbell, and thanks everybody for joining today. The states in particular and territories that have gone through so much work over the last couple of years to make today possible. First of all, just to note the partnership that we've had with CESER, with SCEP, with PNNL as well, and a lot of people to shout out thank yous to. Certainly notable Director Kumar, glad to have Lillian Colin join us today, but Megan Levy, Brandy, Mara, all of you know how much we appreciate the hours, the days, sometimes the tough conversations that we've had, but I think produced great outcomes with even more to do over the longer term. It's something we can be proud of and point to. And I think at least for one of the important legs of the stool of making the energy markets across the country, regulated, unregulated, liquid fuels, interdependencies, the grid, a more stable, secure place, we can respond more appropriately, and all the mitigation things that go into that. But a big thank you to the entire CESER and SCEP team, and pleased to have David Gibson joining today as well, but certainly would note all of the SCEP team too. I think one of the things that I can't neglect that I really want to point out though is watching Campbell Delahoyd and Sarah Trent on the NASEO end working with states, learning from one state, picking it up, taking it to another, helping out, watching them after hours, multitasking, trying to make it happen. So a big thank you from NASEO, from all the NASEO team to them. They made it look easy and calm, calmer than I was. So thank you. I think the other piece is that the way that so many parts of the U.S. state energy program, in addition to security, in addition to grid planning, that feed into mitigation, economic development, affordability, reliability, planning around the grid, et cetera, supporting resilience hubs, solar and storage, the 40101D grid resilience program, which plugs very nicely into a mitigation and preparedness, improved relationships with utilities, large and small, et cetera. So many good things, I think, that came from that. When we started this process, we were very focused on actionable operational plans. I think we'll return to that in part, among other things. Some states have already begun that or done it or what have you. And I think certainly we've heard that from industry, from CESER colleagues, but particularly the state energy offices who are our members and we care most about. I just want to say how much we appreciate what all the states have done and we've done collectively. We have come a long way. I've said it many times, but I started on this security and resilience journey when none of this existed. And there's some of our colleagues that are familiar with that, and we're a long way from that now. And so just want to say a big thank you for that. I think if I have my order correct, Campbell, we turn it to David Gibson of SCEP next. Hopefully I have my notes correct. David, welcome. Thank you for representing SCEP and your team and Keisha and all those that help. David?
Thank you, David, so much. And thanks everyone for attending today, especially NASEO for always being a great partner and aiding states to achieve this huge accomplishment. And huge kudos to Megan Levy and CESER for their hard work and dedication and partnership throughout the last 3 years. I want to recognize all the work the states have been doing over the last few years, applying to funding, standing up new programs, working through federal regulations, and keeping legacy programs going. And also for working hard on their SESPs to meet this new requirement by the deadline. This is really a testament to all the hard work states have put in and the partnership between SCEP, CESER, and NASEO. And while we recognize all that that has been done, there's still much more work to be done, and these plans can always be strengthened, updated, and tested. Please ensure to take a moment to recognize the hard work all of you have done to get to this point. Thank you. And I think I turn it over to Lily.
Thank you, David. Lily Colon here. I am the Principal Deputy Director for the Department's Energy Office, Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response. That's CESER for short. Our director, Piyush Kumar, was planning to join us today. Unfortunately, he was not able to make it. He got pulled into an urgent White House meeting. As you can imagine, there's a lot going on in the space with the threat environment always changing and critical infrastructure. So he was not able to join us today. We are very passionate about the important work that the states are playing in strengthening energy security of the country. And the partnership with NASEO and the state's energy office is one of our priorities for CESER. And this is a very critical meeting for us. So I'm here to celebrate you and pleasure meeting you all live at this meeting. He would have wanted me to start by thanking you all for all the hard work over the last 3 years in updating your state energy security plans. I had an opportunity to get briefed by the team earlier in the week, and we were both very excited about the progress that you all have made to date and very impressed with all the work that you all have accomplished. All 56 plans from states and territories have fully addressed all the elements required in the bipartisan infrastructure law. So kudos to everybody on the call for all the hard work that you have accomplished. It's very phenomenal, and we were very impressed by it. Your work is going to be incredibly helpful as the department, develop a national energy sector risk assessment, which is required by the president under the National Security Memorandum 22, or NSM 22 for short. The NSM 22 requires us to update the assessment every 2 years. And so we're hoping that the state energy security plans will continue to be key input into this national assessment and continue to inform that in the years to come. And to that end, we're going to work with NASEO to host a briefing on NSM 22 activities in the association national plan early next year, so you can see the fruits of your labor and hopefully leverage the national assessment to continue planning and prioritizing your activities. And ensuring that is information will follow to come. With that said, we know that the work doesn't stop here, particularly given the dynamic and increasing risk environment facing the U.S. energy system, from cybersecurity threats like China, such as vol typhoon activity, to physical security incidents at electric substations and natural disasters that continue to challenge communities. We have to continue the partnership to stay ahead of the risk. CESER, we're committed to continuing our technical assistant activities so you can continue to update your plans with evolving risk and taking the necessary actions within your states and regions. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the upcoming transition in the administration. I'd like to share 3 observations from Director Kumar's standpoint. One, would like to flag that CESER was formed in 2018 under the first administration, the first Trump administration. So there's already a strong appreciation for the work that CESER is doing in energy security. 2, CESER has a strong federal cadre of almost 80 employees who are career servants and committed to the mission and appreciation for the importance of DOE working with the state energy offices. And finally, we plan to include a reference of the partnership and the work that both the SCEP office and CESER has done with the state energy security plans as we brief the agency review team in the coming weeks. I'll end by once again congratulating you all for all the work that you've done in the state energy security plans, and thank you for your continued partnership. Also wishing you and your teams and families a wonderful holiday season. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, David, and Lily, for your support and guidance throughout this whole process. Special kudos to the CESER team as well for a lot of the staff level blood, sweat, and tears that they provided to help get all the state energy offices across the line. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Megan Levy with CESER, our fearless SLTT project manager, and then Rebecca O'Neill with the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, both of whom were instrumental in, again, supporting the state energy offices nationwide with their SESPs. So Megan and Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Campbell. And yeah, I think everybody said it really well. Thank you, David Terry and David Gibson and Lily for all of your kind words. This, I can't say enough good things about the states and how hard you guys have worked with 9 billion reasons to do other things, to invest in your states. And you've done that too. You've done it all. So you guys are champions. And it's been such an extreme pleasure to work with you. If under this terrible deadline and, with this sort of Damocles over our heads, but you know what? We got it done. Lily said it, in case you missed it, all 56 plans have addressed all the elements of the law. And these are the elements. And I just wanted to start with this slide because it shows what happens when you get, really good people working on this. When I first was talking to the lab, we learned a lot from that first review, which we won't go back through. But we also learned that we needed to make sense of what Congress had put out there for the states and why they had set it in this particular piece of legislation. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was very, very specific, historic investment in our states, and a wonderful opportunity for the state energy offices to really elevate all the great work that you guys do. And so I just love the way that the lab came to me after we were talking about, hey, mitigation isn't normally what state energy officials are doing. That's over at the EMA, risk assessment. We don't have time to assess the risk to everything. However, when you look at it like this and you think how the elements build on each other, the energy profile, that's our bread and butter. We know energy. And if any of you were at the energy data security data webinar yesterday, you'll know that I really want to do a part 2 because we had so much to talk about. And in fact, as Campbell noted, it used to be called the NASEO Energy Security Data Committee because data is so important. It's our business. But then this listing of threats, hazards, and vulnerabilities and understanding the elements of what goes into a risk assessment. This was a lot of work that you didn't have guidance from the federal sector on this. And we worked really hard to put that together, but you also had to turn your plans in while we're writing the guidance. So again, kudos to all of you. I don't want to belabor this too long because we have a lot of great stuff to get to. And I want Rebecca to talk about all the wonderful things that she learned about your states from reading the plans and all the great stuff that we have to call out. But just that all of these elements are informed by element 6, which to me was the core of the original plans that I started working on back in 2010 was, regional within your state coordination, because that can take a long time to figure out, but regional and tribal also. That emergency response planning and coordination piece, that is the core of these plans. And as David Terry mentioned, it's something we want to get back to. How do we make these more actionable? They got these great risk assessments. What does it mean to have an actionable risk assessment? How often do we update it? How do we measure if the mitigation approach that we've detailed actually means something? So there is more to do, but gosh, you guys have done a great job so far. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what you did, your investment in state energy security. And I'm pretty sure it's going to come up here in just a second. There it is. So at the behest of NASEO, and I think David particularly was like, hey, you should do some office hours. You know, if you people need to talk about this stuff, we need to work through it. And he couldn't have been more right. It led me to try to coin the term radical availability. I thought, you know, if we can't get this guidance out, I just want to be there. I want to be, you can talk to me, you can call me, we can schedule this. Because as being a former state energy official, it's kind of something, you know, you don't always have from DOE. You have your project officer, you can get in touch with them. Big shout out to SCEP for all of the coordination there. But we only have 2 feds who work on energy security at CESER in the state. All feds work on energy security at CESER, but in the state, local, tribal, territorial cadre, there's only a couple of us. And so we try to make sure we can do all the things. And this rose to the top and we needed to do it. But you put in 46 hours of cohort time. That's not nothing. 23 cohort meetings to date. We've still got some. And really, those meetings are only successful because of your participation. There's so much that I've learned. There's so much that we've shared in those cohorts, mostly you guys telling us what works and what doesn't. I think it's been really, really valuable. And I just shout out again to the PNNL team for 14,000 pages read. We did learn from that first review that we would not only read the plans cover to cover, but we would have multiple folks read those plans to make sure there was no bias, there was no misunderstanding, that there would be, you know, a really even-handed approach to this review, which is really just, do we have the elements there? And the first 2022, no state fully addressed all the elements. 2023, we had 26 states. 2024, the final 30 states and territories addressed all the elements. So that's really exciting to me, and is mostly because of your hard work and also NASEO's big support on all of the efforts to get you to come to office hours, to make sure that we had content for those office hours that was useful, and for these cohorts that was very, very useful. And the lab taking what they learned from the review and pointing it out. On the next slide, and Rebecca, please stop me if I'm skipping over something that you want to comment on. But this is one of my favorites because, well, I just love these Zoom pictures of the of the cohort building the community. I always love Ed O'Brien's backgrounds; those are fun. But you know, this is a little bit of what we did. I thought it was great when the lab said, you know, we could have an artist draw the meeting. I thought, wow, energy security is art. That's kind of cool. I haven't thought about that. And I'm sort of an artsy person. I have a Bachelor of the Arts in history, so it's natural that I would be in energy security. But we did write this guidance finally. You guys got it. And it was, the risk mitigation approach in particular was informed by what we learned from you in the cohorts and how you approach the plans. We were just discussing with Director Kumar how often we would update this. And while we do call out drones as a physical threat in the risk assessment links at the end, we may want to think more about, as the threat environment evolves, how will we update these pieces of guidance, and we'll be working with you on that as well. But it's just been an incredible pleasure to build this community, to have these opportunities, to have these conversations with you. You can probably tell from the huge cheesy smile on my face in that picture. My eyes are closed because I'm having too much fun. But no, we've had a great time while doing really important work. So speaking of important work, I want to turn it over to Rebecca now to talk about, give you that debrief, what the lab saw in the plans, things that they want to pull out and shout out as best practices, and a little bit about what we think where we might have room to work on more. But Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Megan. The next 3 slides are quick summaries of some of the key themes we saw in the plans. I would love to tell you that we can give specific examples, but we're trying to be mindful of everybody's particular plan. So we'll do our best to kind of use broad strokes here, and maybe in a future environment, we could talk in more specifics about peer sharing. I think that could be really excellent. One of the privileges of reviewing so many plans is that we see so many different ways to do this job, and And there are a lot of techniques that are used in one corner of the country or another that are really excellent. And we'd love to do more work to share those best practices going ahead. But for today, we'll just stick at the high level. So the next 3 slides are covering different, this is sort of our lingo in, but the elements, right? So the first 4 elements are the energy profile pieces, the threats, hazards, vulnerabilities, consequences, and then the risk assessment, which is meant to integrate all of those features into some synthesis, right? So the main themes, what we saw, again, the states are experts in understanding the energy systems that they have. So the work in the plan is really up-to-date information, clear information, information that helps answer questions that they had in their risk assessment. And what we found year over year is that some states went back into data collection. Even though they met the mark, they still really recognized that when they got to the risk assessment, there were holes in their knowledge that meant that they needed to go back and go get more information. And some states even set up really remarkable new techniques to keep information live, which we're really impressed by. Some of you use GIS analysis. Of course, the map is never really the answer, but it can be really helpful in focusing concepts and also socializing concepts across agencies. So everybody has the same information from which to make the next decision. So we saw some excellent techniques there, and would love to talk more detail at some future moment about those. For the threats and hazards, everybody has a common register of threats and hazards that we're looking at. I'll say that every state has a different amount of expertise or experience in historical basis. And some of the challenge was in thinking about threats that are more difficult to assess, like human-related threats. How do you know when those are coming? Those vectors can be in all directions. So a lot of interest in getting more insight into human-related threats, as well as when threats are shifting. So of course, the weather is a challenging area, but thinking decadally, thinking longer term, we saw some states really try to take the historical benchmark that they had and think about what that meant for the future. Those were areas that we were really impressed by. Everybody looked at extreme weather. There's no exception to that rule. Finally, this is the piece, the synthesis. For guidance that came out halfway through the year, we were actually really impressed with how many states took advantage of the risk assessment guidance that has been developed by CESER. So it was very obvious to us that at least a third of the plans that were submitted this year used guidance that came out in April. That's pretty incredible amount of work that we've all been doing just for the last 6 months. It doesn't mean it's a stopping point, but it really was incredible to us to see people year over year, or sort of minute over minute, as we're all talking about here, take advantage of guidance, apply it to their circumstance, synthesize it, and then do it again. I think one state in particular stands out. I know we had an office hours where they went back and redid it after a little bit more work, and it actually was incredibly insightful at the end, and it made it very easy for them to focus on their mitigation piece. So really impressed with how much work has just been done in the last 6 months. Growth areas, these are not going to be surprising because these are questions we often got, which is, how do I think about the future, not just the past? How do I think about human-related threats? I'm not a law enforcement agency, so what should I be looking for? Megan just mentioned that. And of course, the problem of looking at interdependencies and multi-sector risks. So that's even within energy sectors, very different actors, very different business formations, supply chains look radically different. How do I think about those relationships and then relationships to other critical infrastructure sectors? So those are places where we anticipate doing a little bit more work in the future, is to sort of aggregate best practices and make sure that the states have the right kinds of insights to feed into their risk assessments. Campbell, would you mind advancing? All right, so element 5 is the mitigation piece. And this is one, as Megan mentioned before, where we really recognize that this is new. And in a lot of ways, mitigation is creative. There isn't a single answer for every kind of problem that might arrive in a risk. There's lots of choices that are available. So how do you start to break it down? And that's fundamentally the requirement in the plan. It's not to have the answer, it's to figure out how to get the answer. We saw some really remarkable folks in 2024 come back with some very creative approaches having to do with adherence to other plans within the state, but not just generally, specific adherence. How would I do that? How would I look at that? Connections to other actors and other mitigation practices. And then, of course, the 401(o)(d) programs and the very programs your offices are organizing. How do I leverage those programs to meet the mitigation direction that I just articulated, right? So I think this is one where we felt like most of the plans were at the precipice of doing this. They've designed an approach, or they've said, this is what we think our approach would be, but we really want to socialize it next year. So this is an area feeding right into the conversation about actionable. This is an area where we absolutely see states being very interested in coordinating with their SCSPs with other features and actions that they might be taking and kind of bringing it all together. But we do recognize that states have a different role in mitigation than asset owners do. And that's fundamentally going to take a little bit more like thinking and work and actually governance and ground game to come together. So we did see some states that already had the partnerships, already had the funding, knew exactly what they needed to do in one area, and then be still thinking on a different risk area, right? Sometimes some areas are very well developed and some are not. So even within a plan, lots of variability within mitigation. So hoping to do more support for the states in putting daylight on innovative mitigation approaches and best practices for mitigation, helping you also recognize the relationship between mitigation and risk. I'll say that is super hard. Any given mitigation measure, if you're trying to focus it on a piece of the risk that you've identified you really care about, and it could be a lot of things. It could be a type of hazard, but it could also be a time of year that you perceive to be critical. It could be an end user group. How do you make sure that the mitigation is supporting the action that you're most considering as part of that risk driver? So helping you guys get more measurable information so that you can apply it to your state and use those same techniques. Also, the thing we never hear about, sometimes you guys did it right. And there are successes in the field, and we need to do a better job documenting when those things happen. I know I've had informal conversations with folks at NASEO about, hey, we actually did this thing. We already had the relationship. I already knew the supply chain person, and hey, I did it right. We don't do enough good work to talk about the wins that we have in mitigation so that we can make sure others take advantage of those same resources. So this is one area where we're envisioning doing more work here at CESER and PNNL. And I should just, I think everybody's heard this I don't know how many times, but PNNL is working for CESER in this context. So we are 100% just standing behind Megan and the SLTG program to make sure that we're delivering work that they want to do. So this is the final slide. That's the overview. I don't want to say that this was the most, this is one where it could go in almost any direction. So here at the laboratory, when we're looking at what happened in the plans, the requirements are really open-ended. There is no right way to do regional coordination. We just wanted to make sure the law just simply requires that it's considered, right? There's so much opportunity to do more crossing between when same states in the same region identify different pathways for regional coordination. We also see that tribes, for some states, they have excellent established relationships with tribes for coordination. And other states, it was the first time that they'd really had an opportunity to reach out and talk. So since we see so much variability, it seems like there's just peer network sharing opportunities for tribal engagement. And of course, all of you are very well established in your emergency response protocols. This is an area that is very well grooved, and so no difficulty identifying agency authorities and emergency response for some of these plans. Everybody was very capable of pointing to those protocols. Also some industry collaboration, stakeholder collaboration. Some of you took the SCSPs and did roadshows, talked about energy security with stakeholders all over your states. So having more opportunities, and I think we will hear from those states shortly, to talk about those kinds of practices and how you think that supported your plan ultimately. I think the next slide is a really quick shout out for an upcoming summit. The plan, since it's 95% certain it's Salt Lake, we just want to make sure it's confirmed, but Salt Lake City in late May, we will be sending out some more information about this as well as a website. But the goal here again is to get more coordination and more ideas and more peer sharing around cybersecurity partnerships and best practices, and also recognizing that some folks are very well trained and are moving ahead full speed, and others are sort of like coming in at the ground floor and needing some more fundamentals, wanting to make sure that the summit meets the states where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you. This we're really, really excited about this summit. And we know there's no good dates for any summit, but we hope that this will have so many different tracks that you'll be able to send at least someone from your office if there's, there's no, I think there's like 2 dates in the whole year that maybe everyone could make. So we do understand that it's been a little bit of a challenge finding dates, but we hope that a lot of folks can make it. It'll be different from the NARUC training. We want this to be sort of comprehensive. CYPHER stands for Cybersecurity for Energy Resilience. I'm a big fan of resilience. But I think I want to help. I think the way we want to come at this is like, we understand, we've got our colleagues in Washington State where you've actually got someone who's got a title of cyber and physical security specialist. And that is really, really cool. But every energy office doesn't necessarily have that. So we want to talk about, what does it look like in your plan? We love the drop-in. The DOE drop-in is great. But the best part of the plans are the plans that you craft specifically about your state and what you do. So we are certainly excited for this. We're going to make it hands-on. There might be an artist there. I don't know all the details, but I've even heard our principal deputy director, Lily Kalan, even suggested that we maybe do a cyber escape room, which sounds really fun. So there's going to be something for everybody. So stay tuned. We've got NASEO on the planning team, along with some of our other favorite non-government organizations. So again, CESER's never done this for states before. I think I'm really, really jazzed to show you this and to talk about this stuff. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things we're thinking about for FY25. And a lot of this has come out of conversations with you, things that you've asked us for, things that you've talked about where we've said, boy, we could delve into risk and interdependencies for days. Kind of like that energy security data conversation we were having yesterday. Could just go on and on and on. I mean, don't even get me started on when we don't drive enough, there's not enough food grade CO2 to flush packaging or make beer. That's an interdependency I think we can all be concerned about. And not totally germane to energy, but ethanol, energy. Regional coordination. This came up with almost everybody, but particularly the Northeast, to talk about actual actionable plans outside of just petroleum where we coordinate regionally. Whose governor does what to who? Have we practiced it? Do we know how we'll coordinate and who we'll talk to, how we'll communicate, and who will be talking to industry? We can't have 7,000 calls to every CEO of every utility that has the lights out or is working on quickly restoring things. So, and obviously cybersecurity and physical security, these are big deals. Dealing with domestic violent extremists is not something that we do in our day-to-day jobs as energy officials, either at the federal or state level, in my experience, but how we coordinate and collaborate and how we talk about it is important. And we also know from our friends at the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency that they are prioritizing physical security and some performance goals there. So we'll be in concert with them on that. And then Rebecca mentioned this, but risk mitigation, innovative risk mitigation. I think you can't mitigate every risk. Some you have to manage. I'm sorry, Max and co. There's nothing I can do about that Wanda Fuka plate. Stuff's going to happen, but we can prepare. And then tribal engagement. I just think for those of you who are at our in-person cohort, we learned a lot from the tribes who showed up. So that was a fantastic exchange of ideas, not just us reaching out and engaging, but the tribes reaching back and saying, this has been useful for us. This is a way that we can tell you about all the cool stuff we're doing and vice versa. So I love to see more of that, please. Now for the best part of the show. Well, happy to take questions, but very excited to move to our state presentation. But first, I see Matt Milford in the chat. Matt, great question. Right now, we just have a January meeting. Meeting number 9 is the magic meeting. And that is kind of the closing of the syllabus that we put together way back in March of 2024. So we'll have our January meeting, and then we're going to be asking you guys some questions in that meeting. So be there or be square. It's the week of January 20th. We've got both risk assessment and risk mitigation. And we'll be reaching back out to our island, Territorial, and Alaska cohort to talk about how you want to move forward. Is the word cohort getting you down? Should we call it a working group? Should we meet monthly? Should we meet quarterly? Should we come up with a different cadre of fanatics? I'm open to the vocabulary changes. But right now we just have that one last cohort meeting on the books. I know I've enjoyed them. And Kirsten's also got a good note. Yep, the grant implementation cohorts will also continue. So if enough people are really excited about it, we're happy to continue. You know, it's all fun for me. Any other, but feel free to unmute, come on camp. You know, we like the cameras. Or put more questions in the chat. Otherwise, I'll turn it over back to Campbell to get some real life stories from the field. Because the next thing everybody has to do, and I forgot to say this earlier, darn it, I just get talking. My apologies to the 26 of you who did not get a letter this year. It's a bit of a lift to put these formal letters out with the bespoke comments. And so folks who turned in a governor certification letter this year or resubmitted their plan, both are acceptable under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or the Energy Policy Conservation Act as amended by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. You received an email from me, which thanked you for sending your governor's certification or plan back in. And that email should have said, please consider this your receipt, that you have absolutely met the requirements of the law. So as the law stands right now, there's one more September 30th. We all have to hit. Every single one of you can turn in a governor's certification letter or resubmit the plan. But I'm excited because I think it's really difficult to write this guidance when you're not a person who's walking that plan to your governor. So we're going to hear from Paul Holloway, who's actually walked this plan up that ladder and can tell us some good stories from the field. Paul's a great resource for so many reasons. But yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. And I'm really excited to learn about, how this really works and to see you guys elevating this great work. Campbell?
Perfect transition, Megan. Thank you. So now I'll invite Paul Holloway to provide some remarks for us. Paul is the Senior Energy Security and Resilience Lead with the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. So Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Campbell. And I want to thank you again for inviting me today. And Megan, I'm looking forward to the T-shirts for the Cybersecurity Conference with that logo on it, like a rock show. We'll have T-shirts made. So I was asked to speak today a little bit in terms of the process that we undertook for development of our SCEP, State Energy Security Plan, and submittal up to the governor's office. So in 2023 now, we submitted our plan to DOE CESER. It was evaluated. It was determined that we had met the requirements, and we were instructed to work with our governor's office to then submit a governor certification letter for 2024. So we went through that process in 2024. We developed a memo, as well as an executive summary, as well as utilizing the template letter that we received. All three of those items went up to the governor's office. A little bit of feedback from the governor's office came through our leadership. They wanted a bit of an expanded executive summary. We provided that to them. There were, I think, some questions with leadership, but those were adequately addressed. And that letter was submitted. So that's just a little bit in terms of background, in terms of the process that we undertook. A little bit in terms of some of the feedback that we received on our plan last year, and in terms of the 2023 submission. Going through that process, we realized that we wanted to do an expanded vulnerability and risk assessment. And we had a lot of work going on in Massachusetts that was intersectional to some of the SESP work. We had an ongoing initiative to submit our state hazard mitigation and climate adaptation plan up to FEMA for review and approval, or SHMCAP, which is referred to here as the Resilient Massachusetts Plan, which talked a lot about climate hazards against critical infrastructure, without really focusing too much on the energy piece. We wanted to really zero in on that and expand that work. And then we also had other projects going on through the grid modernization docket at the Department of Public Utilities that were requiring our EDCs to submit grid mod plans. As we electrify, they were required to submit plans in terms of how they would be doing that in the coming decade. And in particular, somewhat tangential to what we're talking about in terms of SESPs, they were required to focus also one chapter on resiliency. What were they doing around resiliency? So there was stuff in there around mitigation measures they would be taking, like vegetation management, undergrounding selectively, tree-resistant wire, etc. So we realized that we had a say hazard mitigation climate adaptation plan, resilient mass plan, as well as our SESP. So this past year, we went and requested funds to the legislature to do what we referred to as an enhanced vulnerability and risk assessment to help better inform our SESP and get to a mid-level scan of critical infrastructure across the three sectors: electricity, natural gas, and liquid fuels, and also look at interdependencies with an eye towards, our decarbonization future, our efforts to electrify. So, infrastructure is changing, risks are changing, climate hazards are changing, and we want to do a little bit more in terms of depth of analysis on that vulnerability and risk assessment. So we have retained a consultant to help us do that, and we are in the throes of that. We expect to update our vulnerability and risk assessment by next June of 25, as well as other work on our SESP. Our energy profile will be updated. For example, we've made some tweaks this past year to our cybersecurity response piece in our emergency response section. So we are making tweaks to the plan, but we wanted to go a little bit deeper. As I said, that mid-tier scan of critical energy infrastructure in the Commonwealth, and also look at infrastructure that might not be located in Massachusetts, but that we have a critical dependency on. So that's a little bit of an expansion there as well. So it's a little bit of background in terms of what the feedback that we got from our 2023 submission. We said, that was good feedback. Let's do a little bit deeper dive into our vulnerability and risk assessment and expand on that. And I should say that one of the products that we expect to come out of this is an integrated map that allows us to look at that mid-tier of critical energy infrastructure and map that against 8 hazards that are identified in our hazard mitigation and climate adaptation plan for the state. And it will allow us to do a little bit deeper dive in terms of what are some of the risks and vulnerabilities and some of our hazard mitigation strategies as we move through the next 25 years. So a little bit of background in terms of how we used it. The SESP has really helped us to frame that next product, and hopefully we end up with a product that's useful for not only us, but a lot of our stakeholders across the state, and with some of our energy partners as well. So it was really a high-level overview. I have no slides today, but a little bit in terms of how we've used it. And those of you that know me that are Campbell, I see Campbell smiling, know that I usually come prepared with 6 or 8 slides at least, and we'll go through those. But today I just wanted to sort of have more of a conversation with folks about how we've used it and the value of the process. And a lot of the value in process, I think, is in the planning piece. It's just going through that process of meeting with stakeholders, and the data analysis piece. A lot of value in that is as much as what you get for a final product. And with that, I'll turn it back to Campbell and stand by for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. I think that's a great highlight of some of the, it was mentioned earlier, but intersectionality of the plans and really where they overlap with ongoing activities. I will take moderator liberty here and note that during our many TA hours, there were countless instances where it was just a simple matter of either us or our colleagues at DOE or PNNL just walking through some existing state programs and projects, mostly funded through SCEP, I'll add, but that have direct security or resilience implications, and really just trying to find out where they fit into the security plan that can essentially serve as citations for mitigation measures in particular. But Paul, this is great. Really highlights the regional coordination, the interdependencies, risk assessment, risk mitigation, and how the SESP can really be a catalyst for additional work and additional coordination and buy-in. So before we turn over to Max, does anybody have any questions for Paul? right, I think you're off the hook, Paul. Thanks. Okay, next up, Max, let me get this propped up here in just a second. We have Max Woods, the Assistant Director of Nuclear Safety and Emergency Preparedness with the Oregon Department of Energy. Give me just a second here.
Yeah, thanks, Campbell. I do have one slide, and just one. So I am talking a little bit about how Oregon is using its energy security plan since submittal at the end of September. Paul, thanks for the information about how yours developed and updated, and I think we can all learn sort of from those experiences from our partners in other states, sort of what to do now that we've done a good energy security plan. What do we do next? So in the last just few months since we've submitted our plan, I was invited to speak to the multiple Oregon legislative committees. And last week, I presented to an Oregon House committee about emergency management, as well as a similar committee in the Oregon Senate, and talking specifically about the Oregon Energy Security Plan and what sort of the results have come out of that plan, and how the legislature can work with the Department of Energy, our governor's office, and other energy partners in our state to implement some of the measures that are identified in our state's ESP. So I have one slide here on the screen. This is one of the slides that I used at my presentation last week to the legislature, and it's really the key slide. I also talked about the process and sort of how we got to where we are. But for the point of this call right now, I just wanted to share this single slide. So what I presented to our legislature was really what I think are the key takeaways from our energy security plan. The top 4 risks and associated mitigation measures that I think Oregon state government can best focus its efforts, all based on the results of our risk assessment and our energy security plan process to come up with these measures. You can see sort of, they're not in any particular order, but there's one about fuel resilience, one about interdependencies primarily between electricity or energy needs and other critical facilities, one about wildfire and winter storm resilience on electrical transmission and distribution systems, and then a final bullet on physical security and cybersecurity. I'm happy to report today that the legislature and my office are working on some specific legislative proposed concepts, call them legislative concepts, proposed measures, for the upcoming Oregon legislative session that begins in January. Probably like most states, we have a long legislative session in odd numbered years. So for in Oregon, that starts in January and it will go until June. And finally, so this is sort of about this. I also wanted to note, sort of aside from the presentation to the legislature, I also wanted to note the importance of our continued work on state energy security planning, and primarily wanted to also just note for this audience about the funding and how important it is that the SCEP funding continue to state energy offices to keep our really to keep our ability to keep doing this good work. The IIJA SCEP funding expires in a few years. We use that bulk of funding to pay for the energy security plan. And now we need to implement it, we need to update it, we need to keep our staffing levels where they're at. I would love to have project funding, sort of mitigation project funding, but I also really want us to keep focus on simply that base level SCEP funding for state energy offices to keep going with the planning and the work that we're doing at the energy offices here in the States. Really, that's all I wanted to highlight, sort of the way that we are operating with our elected officials, as well as our governor's office and so the other state agency partners and energy companies in our state, and focusing on some specific mitigation measures and looking for legislative backing to move forward. Thanks. I'm glad to take any questions, Campbell, if there are any.
Excellent. Thank you, Max. So we will once again pause here for any questions, but this is just a really perfect example of how the plan can be used for additional funding and again, be a catalyst for additional work and buy-in and awareness at the either state legislature or governor level. Any questions for Max?
Hey, Campbell, this is Matt Taylor from Tennessee. Max, quick question for you. I know those meetings were pretty recent, but have you all coalesced around any sort of ideas, potential legislation yet? Do you expect that over the next 6 months? Or just curious, like, have you all started to see anything get in motion?
Yeah, that's a good question, Matt. Yes. And what I didn't tell in the story right here was we had worked since September, or perhaps even earlier, on a specific legislative concept that is around fuel resilience in our state. And that measure was unveiled at the committee meeting that I was presenting in last week from the Oregon House. So there was sort of this natural connection where I was presenting the results of our energy security plan and also there to speak to a proposed legislative concept that the committee I was presenting to was unveiling at that same time. So a little bit of work that goes on behind the scenes to get ready for those meetings, but all building off the energy security plan and to really focus in on what matters in our state. Fuel resilience is really important for us, and sort of there's a lot of risks in our Oregon fuel system. So that's what we were focused on. Yeah, so if all goes well, the measure will be released into the Oregon legislature and, go through the process coming up in January. And you never know how legislation is going to go, but I'm optimistic that it'll be, a good result for our state.
All right, any other questions for Max? Okay, hearing and seeing none. I'll open it up to general questions. I'll note that some of our DOE colleagues had to drop off for another call, just end of holidays, or I guess beginning of holiday season, trying to wrap things up. So if there are any outstanding questions that anyone has for DOE CESER, please let us know. We will field your questions to them directly. But otherwise, we're happy to take general questions now with our remaining time. So we'll open the floor up to everyone here. And if there's no questions and nothing to say, we can certainly give you a few minutes of time back. I do want to end on a very positive note. This was a collective Herculean effort from everyone. Your efforts were very duly noted, and I think I can speak at least on behalf of Sarah and myself and say it's been a pleasure to work with you all on these plans so far. However, the work will continue, but we do encourage everyone to take some time to reflect, to pat yourselves on the back, and enjoy the holiday season. We are always around to support you, so please just let us know if you have any questions or outstanding needs, and we'll see that they are resolved.
I want to say thank you again to Sarah and Campbell. They're the heartbeat of this whole group. They have been invaluable for everything. So thank you, Campbell and Sarah. And you just said it so kindly again. We're available for whatever you need. So really appreciate your hard work. I know David started us off with that acknowledgement of what you've done, and I think that's a fitting way to end too. Thank you.
You're all very welcome. And with that, we'll close it out. Everybody stay safe, and see most of you all in the new year.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.